Hello. Today, we are going to talk about your capstone assignment. How do you do root cause analysis? So, what exactly do we have to do for this final capstone assignment for Module 2, for Part 2? Well, here are the learning objectives for this assignment. We want to lay out exactly what the Safety 2 perspective does in terms of analyzing a sentinel event in a way that shows knowing the difference between work is done and work is imagined, being able to fit into the Joint Commission framework of what is the root cause, explaining what the sequence of key events are, which is really an outcome of a Safety 2 perspective of thinking about what typically happens in these situations, what are the contract cases. Those all inform the sequence of key events and how they're described. And what are our corrective actions that we want to see as opposed to a single corrective action. So as a reminder, there are some requirements that were laid out in prior lectures and readings that the Joint Commission requires. So we're fitting into those. As a reminder, there is which has a very complicated case where there was a medication error. And the medication error was due to a knowledge deficit. So there was a physician who was specialized in administering chemotherapy who had a patient the week before who was very similar to the current patient. And so what happened is the fellow physician, when talking with his attending, said, I think we should treat this patient the same as last week, in that it's navalbine at 100 milligrams with carboplatin to accelerate the impact of it. And the attending physician on the phone said, no, it's not non-small lung cell cancer. For small lung cell cancer, we use etoposide. Okay, and so the fellow ended the conversation with the correct plan of etoposide at 100 milligrams per meter squared plus carboplatin, drove home, went to sleep, went back into the hospital the next day, and flipped back to the medication that was a different kind of cancer. So here is the root causes that the Joint Commission is looking for in their taxonomy. And so in here, you could imagine picking under staff performance factors, staff knowledge deficit, which would match pretty well with what was found. But it doesn't really capture the essence of the Safety 2 perspective. So I'd encourage you to think about a different root cause for this particular example. So if we think about how do we describe sentinel events in the first place? Now, I've switched examples on you on purpose because you have to succinctly describe what the sentinel event was in this assignment. So this is a different example that we did, so don't turn this in as your succinct description, but this gives you a general feel for what people are looking for. So it's, what is the outcome? So if we think about this as the wrong dose error, then you say, what are the 2 doses that are involved? And then also sort of what level of harm was incurred. So at this level, you'll notice that none of the Safety 2 stuff comes out. So that's all in the asking the whys and going behind the front line of the story. So with Safety 2, that succinct description is not the end. It's the beginning, because we are really going to look at how does this system succeed other times. So when there is a fellow physician who actually gives the correct medication, is it because it's the weekend that it's different? Is it because the fellow physician was driving home and talking while he was talking to his attending? Is it because the attending physician was at a conference and so he wasn't going in person to look at what was going on? Is it because the PharmD, who usually oversights the medication orders during the week, doesn't do it on the weekend? Is it because there's no PharmD to help the pharmacist who has never done a chemotherapy bag in 15 years or something, and he has no one to go to because he actually called the PharmD, but she wasn't home? Does he need access to some pharmacy resource if he's required to go against policy and give chemotherapy on the weekend? So what are all the things that make cases like this not come to harm patients? And then how do we document this? So we do have to identify root cause because Joint Commission says we do. So we have to do that, but it's the beginning, not the end. And that's why that sequence of key events is really critical. So many root cause analyses will use a fishbone diagram. We are not going to use that because it is useful. It is a good visualization of looking at contributing and root causes. But I think the timeline-based sequence of key events is more aligned with the safety 2 perspective. So you will struggle with this, and you are going to think, well, what is the right answer to this? What are we looking for? What is the correct answer? And I will tell you, there is none. So you are on the absolute cutting edge of what is happening across the country, where people are saying so much resource is going into the required investigation of these sentinel events. How can we do a better job? We are bought in that safety 2 is a better way to go. What does it actually mean for an actual root cause analysis investigation required for sentinel event reporting? How can we make that a better use of our investments and actually improve safety for patients and make work systems work better for staff? So you might or might not find this helpful. I'm not going to talk this through. I'm going to leave this to you. You can compare what's in here with what's in the paper, but basically I put together a timeline. Maybe it's helpful to you. So I had some events. That doesn't mean this is the right way to do it. It doesn't mean it's a way that will make sense with the root causes and corrective actions you're recommending. It doesn't mean that it even highlights the right things. But here is an example of what it might look like to have a sequence of key events in some kind of timeline format. Across the days, how do you even select the beginning and end? It's not that clear. And then you can also think about, for sequence of key events, is there a way that you can start using annotations or highlights to try and point to the things that you think are a problem? So what I have in red here was focusing on communication because that was the point of the journal article I was writing. That doesn't mean that communication is the right one. There might be other things to think about. What was the role of the electronic health record? What was the role of forms? What's the role of dose error checking? What's the role of how medications are created in pharmacies on the weekend? And then let's think a little bit about what the Joint Commission wants to see. So they want to see what they call a strong action. So this is directly pulled from the Joint Commission's suggested strong corrective actions. So you might look at this and think about how to phrase your corrective actions in languages that the Joint Commission has put out saying are good to use. Intermediate actions are acceptable. You can look at those. Weaker actions, they actually specifically say we don't want weaker actions. We don't really want to have any of these. But you can put them in if they make sense to you. Just know that they're weaker, and so you probably want the lower in the list. So what does safety 2 say about recommending corrective actions? Just remember that if you have a human resources correction, you're probably not doing safety 2. Now, some people say, I really want to revise policies and procedures, and on the list it says no new policies and procedures. It's actually not the case that you don't want to change policies and procedures. Policies and procedures are very useful. It's that the status of them is not to simply go back to an idealized version of work and say, this should have been done, but to actually integrate the work is done and make the work is done and work is imagined come closer together and reduce the gap. And then you want to see standardization as a potentially helpful tool, but with caution, because we have to remember that experts create safety. And so we need to allow that ability to flexibly deviate in order to create safety, particularly since we as the designers of the policies and procedures can't imagine every scenario in advance. And then a warning is a lot of times corrective actions will add new steps. And so just remember that there's often a pushback to any new steps that are added. One of the unintended consequences of adding new steps is that people will not do the new steps. And then if you rely on people doing the new steps, then you have a workaround situation where negative aspects can occur. So I really look forward to seeing what you come up with, because this is hard stuff and you are leading the way. And it's a larger assignment than typical. And we do want to share what you come up with. We're very proud of this notion of what we're trying to do in this class. And we do want to be able to share your work. So if you are not comfortable with it, you can email me. If you prefer to submit your assignment to me personally rather than posting in the discussion, that's okay, you can do that. And just good luck. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. It's deceptively simple as an exercise, and in the details, it gets pretty complicated. So I wish you the best.